News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Dan Schwarzman. We check the markets for you all day long here at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 briefly setting a new record high before settling a few points below its February 19th peak, gaining 49 points or 0.8% today. The Nasdaq ending up 194 points or 1%. The Dow finishing up 404 points or 0.9%. The 10-year Treasury yield is at 4.241%. The 2-year yield at 3.712%. Meanwhile, Nike reported after markets closed, saying sales surpassed analysts' expectations as the world's largest sportswear company is recovering as it clears inventory to make way for fresher designs. Revenue did fall 11% in the quarter ending May 31st. That decline, though, was less than the average analyst estimate compiled by Bloomberg. While the stock has declined 17% this year through Thursday's close, shares were little changed in extended New York trading today. Meanwhile, with consumer spending growing in the first quarter at the weakest pace since the onset of the pandemic, gross domestic product declined at a downwardly revised 0.5% annualized rate. A big piece of President Trump's big tax cut bill has run into a hurdle in the Senate. The parliamentarian of the Senate has ruled that some of the provisions in the draft bill, such as the $250 billion in cuts to Medicaid and other health care spending, doesn't fit the requirements to be passed by a simple majority vote. Congressman Troy Downing and his fellow House Republicans are dismayed, he indicated in a Bloomberg interview.
There's a lot of things that we worked really hard in getting consensus, into getting really good policy. It wasn't perfect for everybody, but we got a really good product through the House, and now parts are taken out. It's frustrating for us on the House side to see it going through this process because it all works together.
That's Republican Congressman Troy Downing. Download the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast to hear the entire conversation with Troy Downing. Senate Republican leaders trying to change the wording on the Medicaid cuts, but that could delay plans to vote on the bill as early as tomorrow. Speaker Mike Johnson urging the Senate to not make drastic changes to the House-passed bill.
They should keep as close to as possible to the House product because it took us, as you all know, a long time to negotiate this very specific provisions of that. So the more they deviate from it, the more difficult the job becomes to get the bill to the president's desk. And we're trying to do that quickly.
Meanwhile, New York Republican lawmaker Nick LaLota says he is, quote, disgusted with a proposal from the Treasury Department on the state and local tax deduction portion of the tax bill. LaLota says the SALT offer from the Trump administration was, quote, not worth countering. The House version of the tax bill calls for a $40,000 SALT cap, while the Senate version says $10,000. Lawmakers from high-tax states like California, New Jersey, and New York have threatened to block the bill unless the SALT cap is $40,000. In a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court ruling in favor of South Carolina, allowing the state to exclude a Planned Parenthood affiliate from its Medicaid program. The court tossing out an appeals court ruling that had prohibited the state from removing Planned Parenthood South Atlantic after it was sued by the provider and a Medicaid recipient. The justices said the Medicaid Act didn't give beneficiaries a privately enforceable right to choose a specific provider. Planned Parenthood has received funding from Bloomberg Philanthropies, the charitable organization founded by Michael Bloomberg. Bloomberg Law is operated by entities controlled by Michael Bloomberg. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth spent a good portion of a press conference criticizing the media for questioning the effectiveness of U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear program, citing a preliminary assessment that said the strikes caused severe damage. Hegseth focused on a report by the Defense Intelligence Agency that had said important aspects of Iran's uranium enrichment program at the underground Fordo facility were still intact despite the bombing. Hegseth claims the media was out to embarrass President Trump as well as discredit service members by claiming the bombing raid was not as successful as initially thought. Meanwhile, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Dan Kane, who was also part of the press conference, was asked if he was pressured to give an upbeat assessment of the strike.
No, I would not. My job as the chairman is to offer a range of options to the president and the National Command Authority to deliver the risks associated with each of those, and then take the orders of the National Command Authority and go execute them.
That's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane. Secretary of Health and Human Services Robert Kennedy Jr.'s Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices has voted 5-2 in favor of recommending Merck's Enflonsia, a one-time shot that protects against RSV, which is the most common cause of hospitalization in infants. Enflonsia won FDA approval earlier this month for children under 1 who are entering their first RSV season. The committee also endorsing this fall's flu vaccinations for just about every American, but they did throw in a caveat. They back only mercury-free flu shots for kids, as well as mercury-free flu shots during pregnancy. Anti-vaccine groups have falsely tied autism to the small amount of a particular form of mercury used as a preservative in certain vaccines. While talking to Bloomberg Television, Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco President Mary Daly says she sees evidence that tariffs may not lead to a larger sustained inflation surge, which would help the case for a rate cut this fall.
It's both sides of our mandate that have really come into frame since we brought inflation down from the really high levels to something that's closer to our target. Ultimately, we have to watch both sides, and that's what I'm doing. And then the fall looks promising for a rate cut.
Daly also says that monetary policy is currently in a, quote, good place. She acknowledges that the labor market is slowing, but does not see warning signs that it's weakening. Other Fed officials, such as Chicago Fed President Austin Goolsbee and Richmond Fed President Tom Barkin, are more cautious and so far do not support a rate cut at the next meeting. Due to a $213 million operating deficit, Philadelphia's Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, known as SEPTA, has approved a fiscal 2026 budget and raises fares by 21.5%. Starting August 24th, the city will lose 50 bus routes, 66 rail stations, and 5 regional rail lines. SEPTA officials, though, are continuing to press the state for help. That's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Dan Schwarzman, and this is Bloomberg.